Hey guys, what's up? So in the previous course we have covered till 42 chapter of the important topics of Laxmikanth, and in this lesson we'll cover beyond the chapter 42 and we'll start with chapter 43, that is the UPSC. Okay, so we have covered all this in the previous course. So if you have not watched the previous course, then definitely watch it. So we'll start this course with the part 7 constitutional body, except the fact that the election commission is already covered. In the previous course we have discovered the important topics in election commission. So we will start this course with UPSC, that is the body which is conducting the exam for which each and every one of us is studying. Then you also have State Public Service Commission, then you have Finance Commission, then you have National Commission for Scheduled Caste, National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. So earlier there was only one National Commission, just to give you a background. So it was just called as National Commission of Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes. But now we have separate national commissions. Okay, so the national commissions are separate now, and now they are called as National Commission of Scheduled Caste, National Commission of Scheduled Tribe, and even for OBCs or the backward classes there is a recent constitutional amendment bill which wants a national commission for backward classes as well, which is right now a statutory body, and they want to make it a constitutional body. Okay, so obviously you know that planning commission is defunct now, and finance commission is the actual body, which is the constitutional body. Then special officer for linguistic minorities. Now this is also many people don't know about it, that such a post exists in India. Then obviously the most important, the most in news post which you see often, that 2G scam related, so many scams are going on. So all that reportage is done by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, so that point is also very clear. Then you have the Attorney General of India, so that point is also clear. Okay, Attorney General of India. And then you have the Advocate General of the state. So this is the part 7, that is the constitutional bodies. So just to give you a context, that there are 3 types of bodies which you will frequently encounter. Any body which has find its mention in the constitution, for example Supreme Court, for example High Court, for example President, Prime Minister, UPSC, SPSC, all these posts or bodies, they are called as the constitutional post because they find their mention in the constitution. So that is the first point. Then second type of body is statutory bodies. Any body which is made up by a law by the parliament. For example, National Commission for Backward Caste. So it is a statutory body. Why? Because it is made up of by the parliament's laws or a state legislature laws. Statute. Statute means law. Third type of body is basically neither statutory nor constitutional, and these are bodies which are made up by executive orders. For example, the erstwhile Planning Commission, it was neither a statutory body nor it was a constitutional body because it was made up by an executive order. So I think the difference is pretty clear now. So each and every one of this is a constitutional body. So if they ask you what are the constitutional bodies in India, you can write Election Commission, UPSC, different SPSCs, Finance Commission, National Commission for Scheduled Caste, National Commission for Scheduled Tribe, and hopefully you will also have National Commission for Backward Classes here. Then Special Officer for Linguistic Minorities, Comptroller, Auditor General of India, Attorney General of India, and Advocate General of the state. So let us talk about the Election Commission. So Article 324, we have already covered this part, and now we have the UPSC chapter number 43. Okay, so Article 315 to Article 323 in the part 14 of the Constitution deals with the UPSC. You have to remember this because this is the body that is conducting the civil service examination for which you are sitting, and sometimes they may ask you in interview or in some other type of MCQ type of exams, that is what is UPSC, which article does it cover, and so on and so forth. Then composition is important of UPSC. How do you become a member of UPSC? For how long the membership lasts? What are the conditions and terms of office of the members of the UPSC? And circumstances in which President can appoint an acting chairman. And who appoints the acting chairman, etc. Then reasons of and procedure for removal of UPSC members. And note that only in the case of misbehavior, President has to refer to Supreme Court. Okay. And then role of advice, which is tendered by the Supreme Court here, that is also important. And conditions when members can be deemed to be guilty of misbehavior. So all these points are absolutely important. So here answer is basically all these topics becomes important. So then provisions related to the safeguard and ensuring the independent and impartial functioning of the UPSC. Okay, so they are almost the same as those for the election commission, because we don't want political interference saying that my son is giving UPSC, I am the member of parliament, please see थोड़े बहुत इंटरव्यू में नंबर दे देना. That does not happen in UPSC. Okay, so it is independent, impartial functioning, and it is one of the most corruption free bodies in the country, where you can safely say that if you study hard enough, you can find your name in the merit list. And by now you should have had these provisions on your fingertips. For as far as the functions of UPSC is concerned, just get a basic idea. You do not need to remember all of these functions, that is not needed at all. Then obviously there are limitations of UPSC and role of UPSC. Just do a speed read of this. Nothing more than that is required. Then you have article chapter number 44. Chapter number 44 is basically State Public Service Commission, SPSC. So they are similar to UPSC, but they are at a state level. Now the first question which you need to understand is that not necessary that each and every state has their own unique State Public Service Commission. Sometimes it might happen that it is combined for two states or more. So if you have already read the chapter on UPSC, you can speed read this chapter if you are thorough with the chapter on UPSC. It will talk about composition, terms of office, acting chairman, qualifications of various persons to be appointed as members. Now removal is important here. So try to note that although the chairman and members of a SPSC are both the appointed by the governor, they can be removed only by the president and not by the governor. So this is an interesting point which you should know, that if you are selected by governor, that's fine, but you have to removed by the president. Rest of the procedure is same that as of the UPSC members. And speed read the paragraphs under the heading independence, functions, limitations, role of State Public Service Commission. They are similar to UPSC. And I have told you Joint State Public Service Commission. Now it is a statutory body, it is not a constitutional body. And read about the appointment of members, terms of office, etc. Thank you. Hey guys, what's up? So we had discussed the various topics till now, and we had also covered all these constitutional bodies. We have covered till the State Public Service Commission in the previous lesson. So we started with the discussion of UPSC, the parent body which is responsible for conducting the civil service examination. Then we discussed all the important topics under the UPSC chapter which each and every one of us should study. Then we discussed State Public Service Commission, so which is similar to UPSC but it is a state level. Then we also discussed that there are joint State Public Service Commissions for like 2 or more states, they are together, but just understand they are not constitutional bodies, rather they are the statutory bodies. So that said, done. So let us start with the discussion on chapter number 45, which is the Finance Commission. So Finance Commission is basically a quasi-judicial body, and you have to note that the members here are appointed by the President of India, and they are eligible for reappointment, and they can hold office for such period as which is specified by the President in his order. So quasi-judicial body means it is not exactly a judicial bodies, but they have some judicial functions. Basically they follow and they can give some verdict, they can ask for the witness to come, etc. They can summon people. Okay, and then the members are appointed by president, and they are eligible for reappointment, and they can hold office as specified by the president in the order in which they are appointed. Now we also have to discuss the various qualifications of chairman and other members of Finance Commission. So that is fine. So what is the function of Finance Commission? So there are 4 functions of the Finance Commission according to this. So try to memorize the 4 functions of the Finance Commission which are listed here, because that is the most important bit, and that is the thing they will ask you in the interview or mains or prelims. And these are static functions. They are very static functions. That is, they remain same for every Finance Commission. They do not change with the Finance Commission, whether it is 13th Finance Commission or 14th Finance Commission. Apart from these 4 functions, the term of reference of every Finance Commission is generally different. So do you understand? There can be a term of reference which is absolutely different between Finance Commission and which is different between Finance Commission, but there are 4 functions as well which are similar for the Finance Commission. Advisory role, just note that it is an advisory role. What do you mean by an advisory role? When the recommendations which you are making are non-binding in nature, that means you are doing an advisory role. Okay, so here recommendations are non-binding in nature, so it is just an advisory role. And then you have chapter number 46, which is National Commission for Scheduled Castes. So earlier, as I have told you, there was only one thing, that was the National Commission for Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes. But later on, the Parliament decided that we will amend the constitution and we will separate these 2 commissions. So we have one full-fledged commission now taking care of the welfare of scheduled castes, and now we also have one full-fledged commission taking care of the welfare of the scheduled tribes. So let us talk about chapter 46, National Commission for Scheduled Castes. So first of all, do not put National Commission for Scheduled Caste and National Commission for the Scheduled Tribes in the group of other commission like National Commission for Women, National Human Rights Commission, etc. Okay, because apart from these 2, none of the rest are constitutional bodies. Even the National Commission for Backward Class, right now as of this moment in 2017 December, it is not a constitutional body. The bill is still pending, it is not passed, and then once it is passed, it will become for backward class as well. So now why it is need to be passed? Because right now National Commission for Backward Class is also like that, it is taken care by the National Commission for Scheduled Caste only. So its evolution, just speed read the evolution, then read the appointment of chairperson and members, their terms of service, etc. So that part you need to understand. Then when it comes to the functions of the commission, just get a basic idea, that's all that is needed. You do not need to memorize these functions. Now when it comes to the powers of the commission, it has all the powers of a civil court. So try to note these powers. Again, it can summon you, it can give a verdict, etc. And also notice that even in case of backward classes, if you have any issues, then this will act as a civil court, not the National Commission for Backward Class. So that is why they want to make it a constitutional body and change this. So it discharges similar functions with respect to OBCs and Anglo-Indian community as well. Then you have National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. So earlier it was part of the National Commission of Scheduled Caste, but later on Parliament thought that we should separate them. So it is another constitutional body just like the National Commission for Scheduled Castes. So try to know the rationale behind setting up a separate constitutional body for scheduled tribes. Okay, and read rest of the chapter on similar lines of previous chapter. So that is correct. Now we have special officers for linguistic minorities. So the provisions are given under Article 350B. So you can note here that the Constitution does not specify the qualifications, the tenure, the salaries, the allowances, service conditions, procedure for the removal of the special officer for linguistic minorities. And if ever UPSC asks questions from this chapter in prelims, it might confuse you here. Okay. Then location of headquarters and regional offices for SSC and Bank PO exams, that becomes important, not for UPSC level exams. And you have to note that it functions under the Ministry of Minority Affairs. Who are the minorities? There are 6 minorities in India. So except Hindus, all the other religions become minorities. Muslims, Jains, Christians, Buddhists, Sikhs. Okay, so all 6 of them, they are minorities, and Parsis obviously. So speed read the rest of the chapter. Then you have Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So it is one of the most important bodies which is frequently asked in prelims and mains. Try to be as crystal clear with this chapter as possible. Read the first para, underline the lines like guardian of the public purse, bulwarks or democratic system, then appointment, terms of office, removal process, grounds of removal, constitutional provision to safeguard, ensure the independence of CAG. Then duties and powers under Article 149, very important. And you should know the accounts and expenditure which CAG audits. Underline the provision related to the audit of local bodies, certification of net proceeds of any tax, and 3 audit reports he submits to the President. Analyze the role of CAG in upholding the Constitution, securing financial accountability, his limitation of actually being only an Auditor General, and role of CAG in the auditing of public corporations, public companies. Then Appleby's criticism of CAG. So remember the 2-3 criticism and prepare short notes on relevance, significance and criticism of CAG. And you can even Google past Hindu editorials. Then Attorney General of India, just read the appointment, qualification, required terms of office, removal, duties and functions, rights and limitations. Okay, focus on his rights in Parliament and limitations placed on him to avoid conflict of interest. He is not debarred from private legal practice. Solicitor General, just note that it is not a constitutional post. Finally, you have Advocate General of the state. They are similar to Attorney General, but they are for the state. Criteria for appointment, terms of office, duties, functions, rights are just like Attorney General. Thank you for watching this lesson. Hey guys, what's up? So in this lesson we will deal with chapter 52 to 59, that is the part 8 of the Indian Constitution. Okay, so let us get started in this. So part 8 is the non-constitutional framework. It starts with chapter 52, which is the Niti Aayog, okay, National Institute for Transforming India. Then you have NHRC, that is National Human Rights Commission. Then you have State Human Rights Commission. So these are not constitutional bodies. Just remember that they do not find any mention in the Constitution. Either they are statutory bodies made by state law, or they are not even statutory bodies and they are just executive bodies. Then you have State Human Rights Commission, Central Information Commission, State Information Commission, CVC, that is Central Vigilance Commission. Then you have CBI, that is Central Bureau of Investigation, and then you have Lokpal and Lokayukt. So we'll start with Niti Aayog. So rationale of establishing Niti Aayog and replacing it replacing the Planning Commission with it. Then composition. No need to remember every member, just remember the chairperson, vice chairperson. Objectives is that you won't be able to remember these objectives verbatim. Make short notes, write keywords in your own language. Example: foster cooperative federalism, formulate bottom-up plan, usher equitable development, etc. Then principles which guide Niti Aayog to carry out its mandate. 7 pillars of effective governance on which it is based. So these principles will help you in writing any answer on good governance, and these are ready-made points, you can note them. Then criticism, here in your notes, do not like harsh words like gimmickry said by the opposition leaders about Niti Aayog. Try to be as balanced in your criticism and be gentle in your tone, and write words like apprehension of corporates calling the shots, whole exercise turning out to be just a change in nomenclature and not an overhaul, and dilution of banning process, etc. Now you can skip to the Planning Commission, just read its criticism, why it was made defunct, and you can answer any question on Niti Aayog by starting with the criticism of Planning Commission, because at the end of the day Niti Aayog exists and Planning Commission do not exist. Then you have National Development Council. Note that just like Planning Commission, the National Development Council was also established by an executive order. That is, it was neither constitutional nor statutory, neither made by law nor mentioned in the Constitution. Then read its composition, objectives, functions, critical evaluation, etc. So all these becomes important point. Then you have National Human Rights Commission, NHRC. So try to note that the National Human Rights Commission is a statutory body, which means it is established by law by the Parliament or state legislature. Both are statutory bodies. Here it is obviously Parliament, Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993. Try to learn the specific objectives of the establishment of the commission. Now here it is very stingy to become the chairman of this commission. Okay, it's not easy. Only like retired Chief Justice can become. So they want to change it. So composition of the commission. So note the qualifications of the chairman and the members, with 4 ex officio members, etc. Then appointment procedure is a must. So try to notice the role of leader of opposition here. So that is why leader of opposition post is important. Then grounds of removal and removal procedure, how they are removed, and try to note the salaries, allowances, and other conditions of service of the chairman or a member, which are determined by the central government and not the parliament. And also try to get a basic idea of the functions of the commission. You do not need to memorize all of these, it is impossible, but try to make notes and bullet points and remember at least 3 to 4 important ones. Okay. Then study working of the commission. Note that it has powers of a civil court, has its own investigation staff, and cannot inquire a matter after 1 year of its occurrence. Also the steps of taken after the completion of inquiry. Then role of the commission, like here you should focus on the limitation of the commission, such as recommendatory, non-binding nature, no power to punish, and so on. And in mains question, it will be mostly related to critical analysis, evaluation of commission's performances. So that part you should cover in detail. So also a list of various human rights issues taken up by the commission has been given. So try to get a rough idea about it and know the main amendments which are carried out in the Protection of the Human Rights Act 1993 via Protection of the Human Rights Amendment Act of 2006. So I think everything is clear now. Then you have chapter number 54, which is State Human Rights Commission. So they are absolute carbon copy of National Human Rights Commission, but they are just at the state level. That is the only difference. The provisions are absolutely the same, so you can just speed read this chapter, nothing much is required. Then you have the Central Information Commission under chapter 55. So it is a statutory body set up under the RTI Act of 2005, and note that it's not a constitutional body. Okay, again it's not a constitutional body. So composition, the appointment procedure, members of selection commission, qualifications required, limitations, then tenure and service grounds, grounds of removal procedure, powers and functions of Central Information Commissioner. Notice its suo motu power, that is they can take the cognizance on their own. Powers of a civil court, and you can memorize the table 55.1. It is relevant for SSC or Bank PO exam, which gives a list of national commission, central bodies, and the related ministries. Then chapter 56 is the State Information Commission. So it is similar to the Central Information Commission, and you can speed read this chapter. Then chapter 57 is Central Vigilance Commission. So note that it is neither a constitutional body nor a statutory body. Composition is basically appointment, members of selection committee. Then you have tenure and service conditions like grounds of removal procedure, etc. Then functions of CVC. So study CVC's relations with the CBI. Just get an idea of the officers on which the jurisdiction of the CVC extends. And powers, note that Central Vigilance Commission has powers of a civil court. Then Whistleblowers Act of 2011, it is important for mains, already been asked. So read its salient features. You can even go to PRS website to read about Whistleblowers Act of 2011. Then you have Central Bureau of Investigation. So it is one of the evergreen controversial bodies. So know the basic information about it. Santhanam Committee, non-statutory body, provides assistance to the CVC and Lokpal and so on. Functions and objectives. Then section 6A of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. It is another controversial object, and yet it is a very important topic. So read about it, especially the Supreme Court judgment. Then Lokpal and Lokayukt, read the basics of Swedish Ombudsman, from which the office of Lokpal is inspired. No need to memorize the details. Then ARC's recommendation on Lokpal. No need to remember the previous attempts to set up Lokpal. Just jump to the 2013 Act. Then Lokpal and Lokayukta Act. Skip the background. Jump to the salient features. Study the drawbacks. And Lokayukta varies across the state depending on the state. To focus on the general provisions. Okay. Then this is all about it. Thank you. Hey guys, what's up? So let us discuss chapter 60 to 66. And we are about to finish Laxmikanth. This is the second last part. So this is the part 9 of the book. and I hope you have watched the first course and you are watching the second course as well. So it will really help you a lot in the longer run. So let us get started. Part 9 talks about the other constitutional dimensions. So you have chapter 60, which talks about the cooperative societies. Chapter 61 talks about the official language. Chapter 62 talks about the public services. Chapter 63 talks about the tribunals. Then you have chapter 64, which talks about the rights and liabilities of the government. Then you have chapter 65, which talks about the authoritative text of the constitution in Hindi language. Then chapter 66 talks about the various special provisions relating to the certain classes. So let us get started with the other constitutional dimensions. So whenever you see cooperative society, always remember the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act. It amended quite a lot of features. It amended the fundamental rights. It amended the directive principles of state policies. So the changes which are made by the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act, they become very, very important. So try to memorize all the three changes. Then various constitutional provisions given under the Part 9b. So here the role of state legislature becomes very, very important. Then election of the members of the board. So do not get confused if in the prelims they ask you that State Election Commission conducts its elections. Okay, just remember this point. This is wrong. Okay, so State Election Commission do not conduct the state elections. Just remember, it conducts the elections of panchayat and municipalities, etc. Okay, so a body is provided by the state legislature does it. So remember this. So for cooperative society also it is separate. So the state legislature may make provisions regarding the audits of the accounts of various cooperative societies. Now why do we focus so much on cooperative societies? Because one of the directive principles, one of the Gandhian DPSP said that we should promote them. And it's not Comptroller and Auditor General which audits the accounts of cooperative societies. So that point also should be very, very clear. Then speed read the other provisions which are given here and know the reasons why the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act was brought in the first place. So this will help you to write mains answers on the cooperative societies. So all this becomes important. Then you have the official languages, which is chapter 61. So why do we need an official language? Because there is a lot of issues related to the language in India, and we faced a lot of issues at the time of independence. Also until today, people want to separate their state based on the languages. So read about the constitutional provisions regarding the official language and also note the key feature of the Official Language Act. Then use of whether the regional language should be used or Hindi should be used as official language. That is going on since so many time. Okay, we do not have a national language, just remember that part, but we do have an official language, and that is Hindi. Regional languages are not official languages, but to compensate for that, we have a schedule in which we list down 22 languages which are considered as the constitutional languages or scheduled constitutional languages. Then read about the language of the courts and legislation. It is always English, and notice the role of governor here. Okay. Also know certain special directives to protect the interests of linguistic minorities to promote the development of Hindi language. So you'll have to learn that as well. So okay. So here 22 languages under the 8th schedule have been given. So we already know that original constitution had 14 languages. Then 8 languages were added later on. Okay. So there are 22 languages. Apart from the usual languages, there are Santhali, Sindhi, Nepali. You may think that they should not be in there, but it is there because they are spoken by the people of India. For example, Nepali is very commonly spoken among the Sikkimese people. So those people who live in Sikkim, they speak Nepali language. Similarly, Sindhi is not in the Sindh region of Pakistan, but there are a lot of Sindhis which live in India also, in Gujarat and Rajasthan. Okay, and Santhali is spoken in the tribal people of the central India. So these languages are spoken by Indians. So only it's not because of we love Nepal that much. It's not because of that. So classical status. So basically Sanskrit and all the 4 southern language plus Odia, they are called as the classical language. Okay, Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Sanskrit, Odia. So they are important for prelims. They can ask you which of the following is not a classical language. Already it has been asked in prelims of 2014. And try to know the names of these 6 classical languages, why they are selected in the first place and why others are not selected, and what are the benefits of this classical status. So then you have chapter 62, that is the public services. So note that among the 3 All India services, IFS does not mean Indian Foreign Service, because foreign service people they do not have a cadre. So we have like IAS, Indian Administrative Service, IPS, Indian Police Service, and IFS, that is Indian Forest Service. So basics of All India services, why do we need them in the first place? Various how they are recruited. Obviously they are recruited through UPSC's exam. Prelims is same, Forest Service exam then separates, and IAS and IPS are recruited by Civil Service examination. Their service conditions. Now basics of central and state services. So just go through them, try to get a very basic idea. You do not need to memorize the list. Then constitutional provision is the most important part of this chapter. So you must know these 5 articles, that is article 309, article 310, 311, 312 and 312A. So it talks about the safeguards, etc. Okay. Then you have chapter 63, which is the tribunals. So remember that article 323A, 323B are for tribunals. So try to remember for SSC Bank exam. Then you have Central Administrative Tribunal. Notes jurisdiction. So members of the Defence Force, officers, servants of the Supreme Court are not covered. Composition, terms of office, appointment procedure. Note that it does not follow Civil Procedure Code of 1908. It is guided by principles of natural justice, and also the appeal do lies before the High Court after the Supreme Court verdict. Earlier it was not there. And also study the difference between article 323 and 323b, and skip table 63.1 and 63.2. You do not need to memorize name and jurisdiction of benches. Then you have chapter 64, rights and liabilities of the government. Just know the terms as cheat, lapse, bona vacantia. It's not that important. Understand the para under the heading C well. This is important for PubAd people. You don't need to remember it. Remember the basics of suits by or against the government under article 300. So liability of contracts, liability of torts. Then suits against public officials. So you should know the constitutional immunities to the President of India and Governor of States, which are given to them. Also read the immunities to ministers, judicial officers, civil servants. Then you have authoritative text of the constitution in Hindi. So speed read this chapter. It is not that much important at all. And finally special provision related to certain classes. You have already covered all this. So this sums up all these provisions for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, etc. So this will help in revision. So thank you for watching this lesson. Hey guys, what's up? So this will finish off the Laxmikanth, and this will deal with chapter 67 to 76. That is the part 10 and the part 11 of the book. It itself looks like the constitution. Okay. So the part 10 deals with the basically political dynamics. That is the political parties, elections, how did it happen in India, voting behavior, on what lines the voting happens in India, then election laws, electoral reforms, anti-defection law, various pressure groups, national integration, then you have foreign policy, national commission to review the working of the constitution, etc. So all this is the part 10, that is the political dynamics. Then you have chapter 67, political parties. So try to get a basic idea of the types of the parties, the kinds of political system around the world which are present. Okay. Then characteristic features of the Indian party system. Then recognition of national parties and state parties, which becomes the most important part of this chapter, and it is very important for prelims. So try to carefully read the conditions for recognition as a national party. So why a particular party is called as a national party and a state party. So you will have to memorize them. Okay, that is important. Then table 67.2 gives the names of recognized national parties and their symbols. So know the names of these 7 parties for SSC, Bank, PO, etc. So these are the, even for UPSC, you should definitely remember at least the name of these 7 national parties. Okay. So they have their own symbols as well. Obviously state parties also have their symbols, but national parties are always given like preference. How do you recognize them? That is the important bit, and that you should understand and learn. Then chapter 68 deals with elections. So constitutional provisions regarding the elections, that is Election Commission of India, one electoral roll, various grounds to become eligible for inclusion in the electoral roll, election tribunal under article 323b. So here in point 7, note that the orders which are issued by the delimitation commission, they become final, they cannot be challenged in any court of law, and it was asked in the prelims of 2012. So delimitation commission, etc., they are important. Then election machinery. So you have already read about Election Commission of India. So here read the basics of Chief Electoral Officer, District Election Officer, other officers and observers, etc. And then election process. So focus on the MCC, that is the Model Code of Conduct. When it comes into effect, nomination process. Rest of the chapter you can just speed read, that is not required. Then you have chapter 69, that is the voting behavior. It is not relevant for prelims or MCQ type exams. It may be relevant for sociology, political science, optional students. But still, if they can ask you a mains question, I don't think they will ask. Especially in essay, they can ask you how the voting happens in India, but each and every one of knows. No, hardly anyone votes on the line of development or listening to their debate, but it is mostly because on the line of, especially in the poor backward states, it is on the line of caste, it is on the line of race, it is on the line of religion, it is on the line of like political gains, etc. Okay, it is also on the line of freebies. Whoever gives more money, the vote will go to them. So just read the role of media in elections and voting behavior, and you can read the you can skip the rest of the chapter. Then you have election laws. So the two acts which are given here includes RP Act of 1950, that is the Representation of People Act of 1950, Representation of the People Act of 1951. So these acts are important for both the prelims and mains. So try to remember their main provisions, difference between the two acts. You do not need to remember or study the tables which are given in this chapter, and parts and sections of these acts won't be asked except some very specific sections which are in news. And out of the two acts, focus more on the 1951 Act because it contains provisions relating to important electoral matters like qualifications and disqualifications, registration of political parties, corrupt practices, electoral offences, and so on and so forth. Then you have Delimitation Act of 2002. So here try to focus on the functions and the powers of the Delimitation Commission, and you can skip the rest of the chapter, that is not needed. And then you have chapter 71, which is electoral reforms. So it is a very very important chapter for UPSC. It is an evergreen chapter, and it is not only required for UPSC mains but for everything else, essays, etc. And you can make very crisp notes on this. Then various committees related to electoral reforms. So no need to remember all. So just remember important ones like Dinesh Goswami Committee, Indrajit Gupta, NCRWC, okay, Review of Working of the Constitution, Second ARC Administrative Reform Commission, JS Verma. So these recommendations have been studied under 4 heads in a chronological sequence and focus on the reforms since 2010. For example, restrictions on exit polls, none of the above option, okay, VVPAT, verified voter, okay, paper audit trail. Then striking down of section 8(4) of the Representation of People Act 1951. So they will remain hot topics for the next few years to come. And for reforms before 2010, you can just make short notes and bullet points and keep them in mind. Then chapter 72 is anti-defection law. It is very important chapter for both pre and mains, so read it carefully. Basics: first, know about the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1985 under the Rajiv Gandhi government, provisions under the 10th schedule. Note the different disqualification criteria for different members. Nominated is different, independent members is different. Exceptions in case of merger and becoming presiding officer. Then you have deciding authority, Supreme Court's verdict in the famous Kihoto Lahon case. And finally, do the critical analysis of the act and advantages and criticism, which is must for writing each and every mains answer. And also read the provision of 91st Amendment Act of 2003. It is very important because it limits the number of ministers to 15% of the House strength. Then pressure groups, it is relevant for mains. Read the first two chapters, and later pages give only the classification of pressure groups. Get an idea of these types. Keep in mind one or two example. And it is an analytical and contemporary topics. It was very important for mains. So this question was asked in 2017. So keep the above questions in mind whenever you are reading this topic. Take help of Google for proper analysis. Okay, and do not answer this question without contemporary examples. Then you have national integration, purely mains topic. Focus on the major obstacle to national integration, meaning of regionalism, communalism, forms in which they manifest themselves, various manifestation of casteism, historical background of linguism, official language act. You can speed read the paragraphs under the heading of National Integration Council. Try to get an idea of its composition, objectives, functions. You can skip the rest of the chapter. Foreign policy, this is not a good thing. Okay, you can read other books for this. I would advise just read the newspaper, that's all, and just read the Wikipedia articles. But still focus on non-alignment, concealed disarmament policy, Gujarat Doctrine, nuclear doctrine, Connect Central Asia policy, Act East policy, then NCRCWC. So this is not that important, okay, but you can get ready-made suggestions and fodder points for writing mains answer. It will give a summary of achievements and failures of our political systems. So focus on the recommendation, try to grasp as much as you can. So I hope I helped you in reading Laxmikanth faster. So thank you for watching this course.